From Human Rights Watch just said Zimbabwean opposition politician Tendai Biti is safe on Zambian soil after an attempt earlier to arrest him. He was accused of inciting violence after last week's election. The MDC Alliance is challenging the results, arguing that they are rigged, and Biti's arrest has shed some light on, of course, post-election violence and the crackdown on opposition leaders, as Dewa Mavinga just said. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined by Professor David Moore from the University of Johannesburg. Well, you were in Zimbabwe during elections. Upon reflection, what do you think could have or contributed to what we're seeing now, Tendai Biti having to leave, scores of people are leaving the country, others are in detention, and there seems to be this huge clampdown?
Well, the media seems to be, and I'm not including you, of course, putting a lot of blame on Chamisa and Tendai for inciting people to violence. That's the state media in Harare, that's their side of the story. My perspective, look, when I left, it was Tuesday night before the 7 people were killed in the back by the military. And I thought things would be fairly peaceful. I thought soldiers would not actually shoot on their friends, but they did. Since then, the head of the armed forces, Valeriro Sibanda, has said he did not place the orders on those to those soldiers. So the suspicion is that Constantino Chiwenga, who's the vice president and the minister of defense, which is unconstitutional, you're not supposed to have those 2 posts, and who used to be the head of the armed forces as he did the coup for Mnangagwa. People are saying he's got crack units or rogue units that are doing this. I imagine there's also, when we're talking about the violence in the townships, we're talking about drunken soldiers and drunken MDC celebrators. So things seem to have gone out of hand. If Emmerson Mnangagwa, the president-elect, and still the president with the powers of a president, really has control over that situation and wanted to have peace, he would do something. But what he has said is, okay, you guys go to the Constitutional Court. So they have until Friday to present their case, MDC Alliance, about the election, about what they contend is a poorly run election and poorly counted and so on. So they have till Friday at close of business day to present their case to the Constitutional Court, not the electoral court. And then I was just reading a piece as you called me in. I think they have 3 or 4 days to actually be at the court. The court has, let's say for the sake of argument, 48 hours to make up their mind. Then what happens? If Chamisa is right, if this poker game goes in his favor, if he can find the numbers, and I'm telling you, the number crunchers who are working for civil society and the MDC and so on, they are crunching very carefully. And I couldn't say if Chamisa has that ace card. And besides, you have a constitutional court which is heavily controlled by ZANU-PF appointees. You know, they got farms and so on. So they could call another election, they could call a runoff, or they could say, sorry, Chamisa, you've lost, and the inauguration will happen.
Before we even get there, Prof, let's just take a step or 2 back. And you don't have to be modest about people who have actually put some blame, or the blame squarely, maybe one should say, on your Tendai Bitis and your Nelson Chamisas. But if we take a few steps back, we know the history of the government in Zimbabwe, of ZANU-PF, and how previously they have stolen elections. And one is not saying this one has not been stolen as well. Yeah. But there were quite a number of mechanisms of things done to ensure that if that was to happen, it wouldn't be so easy for ZANU-PF to steal an election. And the question I kept asking a few people there was, what happened to those mechanisms where you had party agents at every polling station, certainly on the part of both ZANU-PF and the MDC. So you needed to do the number crunching, and if there was prima facie evidence of wrongdoing, then you could have set the ball rolling, in particular the MDC and SARS. And I still wonder why that didn't seem to happen.
Yeah, the MDC could have been better organized. They came into the election after Morgan Tsvangirai's death, after Nelson Chamisa and Thokozani Kupe had their little battle, and with a very shaky alliance with 6 other parties, including people who had left the MDC before, such as Tendai Biti, Washman Nyube. And I think they concentrated too much on the presidential election alone and didn't have all the constituency arrangements in place. So at the last day, they were looking for some polling agents. And it was, I know the ZAPU candidate in Bulawayo, one of the southern townships, where there were 17 candidates. He was trying to register some polling agents, and there were all sort of technical glitches. The ZEC would send them back and so on. So I think there may not have been as many polling agents there as there should have been. And so that's a problem there. But I think there was also a problem with the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, which was also poorly organized, and were, very rude and uncooperative with people who were challenging their preparations. At the end of the day, on election day, as I'm sure everybody now on the ENCA knows, you post the ballot results in every polling station after the count. You have that local count. Then they go off to the central counting place. I don't think anywhere in Africa there have been observers who go to the central counting place. So if you're a little bit slack on getting those local numbers in, and you have to be fast, you've got to have everybody with a cell phone and your connections working and so on to get them back.
Which to a large degree you had in Zimbabwe this time around.
Yeah, you do, but it's not all, anyway. Then we waited how long for the Mashonaland West count to happen? And that count gave 50.8% to Mnangagwa at the presidential level. A landslide for the parliamentary elections for MPs. However, as one person I was talking to who's in the rural area said, you line people, you get them 10 in a batch, you say, you go vote, you know how they're going to vote. So you don't need to rig in the rural areas, you just have to intimidate. So it's fairly easy to win at that level. So we have 50.8% victory, so-called, for Emerson Mnangagwa. That is, 40,000 votes or something like that. It's not a lot. So that margin of error in collecting all those numbers for both Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, and they are sloppy too, is crucial.
Okay, I want to hold your thoughts, because I have to get to this point. Let's say that a lot of the detail you're talking about, which may prove or disprove whatever is out there at the moment, may come if indeed the court challenge is mounted by Friday. But I want to take you back to the responsibility that Tendai Biti, that Nelson Chamisa had when they went out there the day after elections to say, don't accept the election result that is going to be announced and take to the streets. To what extent? Yes, those soldiers had no right to shoot at those people, let alone kill them. But we know the history of the country. That, in my view, put even more responsibility on them to make sure that there's no blood spilled in their name under whatever guise and whoever may have been responsible for it, and wrong as they were.
Yeah, look, you're in a tough situation. You have a lot of supporters putting pressure from under you, saying, look, we got to do something. If you tell us not to, we might disobey you. I was there for a couple of weeks before the election, a week before the election, and everybody I spoke to on the streets
But
was saying...
leadership is judged as much by what you do as it is judged by what you don't do.
Yeah, and Tendai and Nelson are fairly volatile characters. It could also have been a bit of a gamble on the military itself, because it's pretty clear that the military is divided. Not everybody's with Chiwenga, not everybody's with Mnangagwa. You have two very professional leaders there, Sabanda and the head of the army itself, who was formerly ambassador to Tanzania. You probably had a pretty good bet that they would not call out their soldiers, and it seems like they didn't. So you had these rogue units that came out. Now, the MDC has some tough characters too, but they didn't have guns. They roughed up some people. They were very excited. I think, we could agree that this was a very tough call to make. And also we know that in cases in the past, when there has been no big street demonstrations after the election, there's been even more violence. Remember 2008, and Morgan Tsvangirai went to the Dutch embassy and then to Botswana.
Okay. Prof, I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we don't, and we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much.